Hello everyone. Uncle D works day and night. Huyen and Maya's new home is almost complete. Each brick he lays, each drop of sweat that falls, is not just building walls, it's building safety, warmth, and a place where laughter can live. Working from dawn until the stars appear, D is about to give Huyen and little Maya not just a perfect home, but a promise that they will never again face the storms of life without shelter, without love. The sun had not yet risen when D's footsteps echoed softly on the damp earth. The air was cool and heavy with the smell of fresh soil, but his hands were already covered in dust and splinters. Day after day, night after night, he worked beneath the open sky, his body aching, yet his heart burning with a quiet determination. This was not just a house he was building, it was a promise of safety, warmth, and dignity for two people who had lost too much already. Each stroke of the hammer carried his silent thoughts. He imagined Huyen's smile when she first stepped inside. He imagined Maya's laughter as she ran barefoot across the wooden floor, her tiny feet tapping like music against the boards. He did not mind the hunger in his stomach or the cold wind at night. The thought of their happiness was enough to keep him moving. The villagers often passed by, watching him work with quiet admiration. Some offered a cup of tea, others lent him tools. They saw the way his eyes lit up when he spoke of the little family waiting for this home. He never said much about his own struggles, those sleepless nights and weary mornings, but they could feel it in his voice, the weight of a man who had chosen love over comfort. And now, after weeks of labor, the home stood nearly complete. Its bamboo walls stood firm, the roof woven tightly to shield against the rain, the small garden already waiting for the first seeds. Under the fading light of dusk, D sat on the wooden step, his back against the wall he had built with his own hands. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to breathe deeply, to imagine a future without fear. Somewhere not far away, Huyen was cooking dinner, unaware of how close they were to this new chapter. Maya was probably chasing the chickens again, her laughter rising into the evening air. Soon, D thought, they would open the door to this place and find more than a house. They would find the beginning of a life they deserved. It was not perfection in the eyes of the world, but to D, it was the perfect gift. A home built not with money or luxury, but with the strongest foundation of all, love that refuses to give up. By the next morning, the sound of a hammer echoed once again through the quiet village. D's hands were blistered, his back aching, but there was a fire in his heart that no pain could put out. The walls were standing strong now, and the roof was almost complete. Only a few more days, he told himself, and Huyen and Maya would finally have a home that could keep out the rain, the wind, and the loneliness of the past. Huyen stood a short distance away, watching silently. She had seen D work in the heat of the day and in the damp chill of night, often refusing to stop for rest. Sometimes she would bring him tea, sometimes a warm meal, but he would only smile, thank her, and go back to work. Maya skipped around in the grass nearby, collecting wildflowers and placing them in an old tin can. "This is for our new home," she announced proudly, her voice ringing with joy. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, D sat on the porch's unfinished steps. His shirt was damp with sweat, and his arms bore streaks of sawdust and dirt. Huyen came and sat beside him, placing a small bowl of warm rice in his hands. "You don't have to push yourself so hard," she said softly. "We could take our time." D shook his head. "I want this to be ready for you both as soon as possible." Every day you spend without a safe home is one day too many. In the fading light, Maya ran toward them, holding the tin can filled with flowers. She placed it between them, smiling so wide her eyes almost closed. Now our home will be beautiful inside too. For the first time that day, Dee allowed himself to rest, breathing in the simple sweetness of that moment. The walls might not yet be finished. The roof might still have gaps, but in his heart, the home was already complete because it would hold love, laughter, and the promise of a safer tomorrow. The morning after the roof was finished, Dee awoke before the sun, the faint chill of dawn still clinging to the air. He moved quietly, careful not to wake Huyen and Maya, and stepped outside. The village was still wrapped in mist, the smell of wet earth drifting from the garden they had planted together. Dee ran his hand over the wooden doorframe, smooth now, after days of sanding. This house was no longer just wood and nails. It was a piece of his heart, built with every drop of sweat, every aching muscle, and every silent prayer. By the time Huyen emerged with a small basket of tea leaves, Dee was already fitting the last latch on the window. She stood for a moment, watching him, her eyes soft with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "You never rest," she said quietly, stepping closer. Dee smiled without looking up. "I will, once everything is perfect for you and Maya." That afternoon, Maya ran barefoot through the yard, her laughter spilling into the open air like a song. She stopped by the door, holding a bunch of wildflowers she had picked. "For our new home," she announced proudly. Dee knelt down, taking the flowers as if they were the most precious gift in the world. "Then our home is complete," he said. They placed the flowers in a small jar on the windowsill, sunlight falling gently across the room. The walls glowed warm, the air smelled faintly of fresh wood and tea, and for the first time, it felt like the space had truly become theirs. That night, as they sat outside under a blanket of stars, Huyen's voice was barely above a whisper. "You've given us more than a house, Dee. You've given us a place to belong." Dee didn't answer right away. He just looked at the little home they had built together, its windows glowing softly in the night, and thought this was all he had ever wanted. The days passed quickly, each one bringing the house closer to completion. Dee's hands were blistered and sore, but he wore his exhaustion like a badge of honor. The walls now stood tall and strong, the roof no longer just a frame but a shelter ready to keep out the rain. Every nail, every wooden plank, carried the warmth of his devotion. Huyen would often appear quietly at the edge of the work site, carrying a small thermos of tea and a plate of sweet potatoes. She would place them beside him without a word, her eyes lingering for a moment on his tired face before she returned to her chores. Dee never asked for thanks, but the way her gaze softened told him she understood the depth of his effort. Maya had taken to helping in her own way. She would run back and forth with small nails in her tiny hands, offering them to Dee as if she were handing him treasure. Sometimes, she would sit cross-legged on the ground, sketching flowers in the dirt and humming softly while watching the house take shape. At night, when the cicadas sang and the cool wind passed through the trees, Dee would sit outside, staring at the unfinished home. He imagined Huyen standing by the window, calling Maya in for dinner. He imagined laughter echoing from the kitchen, the smell of warm food filling the rooms. It wasn't just a house he was building, it was a promise. A promise that they would no longer wander. A promise that no matter how hard the storms came, they would have a place to return to. And with every sunrise, Dee's resolve only grew stronger. The day when Huyen and Maya could finally step into their new home was close, so close he could almost hear the sound of their footsteps on the wooden floor. The next morning, the air was crisp, and the mist curled lazily around the fields. Dee was already up, his hands busy tightening the hinges on the front door. Every strike of the hammer echoed through the quiet, blending with the soft songs of the sparrows in the mango tree nearby. Inside, Huyen and Maya moved carefully, sweeping away the last bits of sawdust and arranging the few belongings they had brought. The walls, though simple, now carried the scent of fresh paint, and the floor felt smooth and welcoming under bare feet. It was no longer just a shelter, it was a home. Maya skipped around, her laughter ringing like little bells. She kept running outside to tell Dee about the flowers she had found by the fence, then rushing back in to help her mother wipe the windows. The sunlight poured in, turning the small living room into a golden space where dust danced like tiny stars. When the final nail was driven in, Dee leaned back against the wall, wiping his forehead. He looked at the home not perfect by the world's standards, but built with love, sweat, and quiet sacrifice. It was the kind of place where the wind could sing through open windows, where the smell of Huyen's cooking could drift out to greet neighbors, and where Maya could grow without fear. That evening, they sat outside on a low wooden bench, sipping tea. The horizon glowed orange, fading into the deep blue of night. No one said much, but the silence was full, not empty. Their hearts were full too, knowing they had built more than just a house. They had built a new beginning. A home is not just built from bricks, wood, or bamboo. It is built from love, sacrifice, and the dreams we hold for the people we care about. Dee's hands worked until they were rough and sore, yet his heart stayed gentle and warm. He never once complained, because every nail he hammered and every wall he raised carried the hope of giving Huyen and Maya a place where they could truly belong. In life, we may not always have wealth, power, or comfort, but we can always give our time, effort, and care. These are the true foundations that last longer than any house, foundations built from trust and kindness. Sometimes, the greatest gift we can give is not money or material things, but a safe place for someone's heart to rest. Just as Dee worked silently through the nights, love often speaks the loudest without words. It is in the way we show up, in the sacrifices we make, and in the promise we keep for those we love. Life has a way of testing us in moments when we least expect it. Sometimes, the struggle is not about building a house, but about building the patience, faith, and determination that make a home truly meaningful. From Dee's long nights of work to Huyen's quiet prayers and Maya's laughter echoing in the yard, this story teaches that love is the foundation stronger than any brick or beam. A home is not measured by its size or its beauty, but by the warmth it holds and the hands that built it. It also reminds us that progress often comes in small steps. Every nail hammered, every wall painted, every shared meal in the midst of construction is a part of something bigger. The road may be tiring, but the destination is worth every drop of sweat when it is reached together. And perhaps the greatest lesson is this: when we pour our effort into something with love and sincerity, it becomes more than just a place to live. It becomes a safe haven where hearts can rest, dreams can grow, and no storm can shake the bond inside.